E claro, voltamos aqui para nossa última rodada da Conferência do Orgulho Trans 2025, que é um evento idealizado pelo Instituto SSEX, com apoio do Ministério da Cultura do Governo Federal, através da Lei Rouanet, o patrocínio de Petrobras, nossos parceiros de mídia, TikTok, Fast Company Brasil, e também a gente tem o apoio de iFood, Bond, Biblioteca Mário de Andrade, SP Cidade de Todas as Artes e também da Prefeitura de São Paulo.
Falando de apoio, galera, vamos apoiar a nós mesmos, não é mesmo? Vamos entrar lá no TikTok, no Instagram de Sexbox, vamos seguir, vamos curtir, vamos comentar, entendeu? Dá aquela forcinha. E se liga também no site, que é www.sexbox.com, www.sexbox.com, e a página orgulhotrans.com.br. E a nossa sessão é, com certeza, uma das mais esperadas, né? A gente vai ter uma fantástica palestra sobre transtopias e o nosso futuro. Eu acho isso muito massa, de verdade, gente. Para quem está aqui criando conteúdo para a internet há mais de 10 anos, eu penso muito sobre... não só nesse lugar de criar novas utopias, criar novas realidades, prototipar a realidade que a gente quer viver, e talvez a gente não viva, não esteja vivo para ver lá na frente, mas que a gente está construindo ela. Então, acho esse tema muito massa. E agora é a hora da gente imaginar o que a gente quer mudar, visualizar o futuro que a gente busca e reimaginar o mundo a partir de perspectivas mais que humanas. É sobre lembrar que a mudança não é linear nem finita. Ela é atmosférica, infraestrutural e celular. Nosso convidado irá explorar a presença complexa da mudança contínua.
Amor, quem vai guiar a gente nessa viagem antropológica, simbiótica, denominada, né, de transtopia, futuro transplanetário e permanecendo com a mudança. É ele, futurista, artista multigênero, que atua entre aí as disciplinas para semear o semioceno, um futuro planetário que queremos para todos. E claro, a grande pessoa pensante de motor. Então recebam com muito carinho AUDAX and GAWLER.
Hi, everybody. My name is AUDAX GAWLER. I'm from the continent that gets called Australia, but is in fact a collection of hundreds of indigenous nations. I was born in a place that is called Yorta country. I currently live on Wurundjeri country. And a lot of my learning has come from a place called Noongar country. In my work, I explore dynamics and relationships between human and non-human worlds, looking at the dominant ideologies that we live under and exploring how we might make alternative futures. Unsurprisingly, that is incredibly framed by my experience as a trans and non-binary person. And what I want to speak to you about today is how we future as non-binary and trans people and what we offer in terms of unique skills and perspectives under that framework. Because my work involves more than human worlds, ecologies, atmospheres, microbes, cosmic spaces, soil, and animals, it is unsurprisingly an embodied experience. And it's crucial when we think about how we're going to make futures, that we include our bodies in that process. And we'll speak a little bit more about why that is the case as we go along. But in the meantime, because I am an artist and a creator, I wanted to begin with a process that is very dear to me and I work with a lot, both in my own practice, in my own, and also with groups when I facilitate or when we develop things together. And it's an invitation to bring our bodies into the room, to reframe our bodies as embedded in and embodied by more than human worlds. And it's also a nice invitation at the end of the day to close your eyes for a minute and to connect as a group. So I would invite you now to just close your eyes if you would like. The important thing is to be comfortable. And the first thing we're going to do is pay attention to where our bodies are coming into contact with the things beneath us. Perhaps it's a chair, perhaps it's the ground. Noticing where your back is touching, where your legs are being held. Noticing how you can relax your body and be held up by those structures. Feeling the gravity drawing you down and the support of the architecture beneath you. And we just begin by taking 3 breaths as a group, all together. Breathing in and out. In and out. In and all the way out. And if we could play the track that we have lined up, whoever might have that music to play. And just keeping your eyes closed, breathing at whatever pace feels natural and comfortable. And we begin with the breath. Remembering that all the air that exists on Earth is all the air that has ever been here. The same oxygen since time immemorial, passing round and round, like the planet. When we breathe in, the air we breathe in comes to us by way of storm clouds. It's tumbled its way through winds and soft summer breezes. It's the air that has found its way through the feathers of eagles and vultures, slipped underneath butterfly wings. It's the air that is released from glaciers as they melt. The air tumbled in waterfalls where they hit the rocks. The air passed through the soils of the forest floor. And every breath that we draw in is us taking in the exhalation of the planet. A blue whale breathes out and we breathe in. The leaves of the tree breathe out and we breathe in. And when we breathe out, we breathe back into that cycle. Breathing out as the turtles breathe in. Breathing out. Horses breathe in. And letting your attention come to your mouth, thinking of the moisture under your tongue. And knowing that that water, the same as the air, has found its way to you by way of all the other places in a one. Our bodies flow with the waters of the world, and we drink them as they poured from spring, as they've been filtered in ancient subterranean aquifers. The wetness in your mouth is rain, is storm, is river. We use it to swallow, or use it to cry, or use it to sweat. And allowing your attention to slip down through your throat, down to your heart, the center of our chests that pulses with the electromagnetic center, where we radiate into the world, where we're able to be felt by all that we pass through. Our fields rippling out through forests as we pass through them, rippling through one another as we pass in the street. Our hearts shifting and moving to meet one another in their pulse. And that beat is the same beat ripples through the world. Beats in the heart of large animals and small Even the earth itself pulses. Down in the deep center, sending out a ripple of electricity, a detectable pulse. The heartbeat. Let your attention come across your shoulder, down your arm, across your elbows, into your wrists and fingers. The bones that we have here are mimicked across the world. The structure of our arm is one big bone at the top, two smaller bones in our forearms, little bones in our wrists, our fingers. And we find that same shape over and over again through all other bodies of other sizes. Inside the fin of the whale is one bone, two bones, little bones, and then the shape of fingers, different proportions, but the same patterning. Inside the wing of the bat, one bone, two bones, little bones, fingers. Again, inside of the seal, even in the leg of the horse, this place where we meet the world, where we reach and touch and tangle with the others, echo to the land and the sky and the sea. You let your attention drop out of your fingers now, down through your legs, down through the bones. And noticing here, we contain the minerals of the world. Iron, magnesium, calcium. All the components of the world are replicated again and again. Here's to the sock. We see the iron pumping through our blood, knowing that the only place it can be made is inside dying stars. We find the same calcium in our bones that we do inside of the mountains. Letting your attention come down to your feet, down to the floor, out through the carpet, down into the topsoil below. Seeing here the bones of the world like the bones of our bodies, rocky, sharp. And as we travel down, we travel back through time, moving past fossils, moving through fed rock, moving past clay. Noticing other bodies through time and tangle. And let yourself just slip back up now. Back up through those layers again. Back up through the rock till the rock becomes clay. Back up through the clay till the clay becomes soil. Noticing passing worms and nematodes, soil bacteria doing their busy work of metabolizing the world. Passing the mycelium network and feeling its electric pulse as it passes nutrients and communication around through the soil. And letting that charge ripple back up to the base of your feet. Let it rippling out through the soles of your feet and up into your ankle. Up through your bones, up through your flesh. And as you pass through your belly, noticing here the biome, the complex community, billions of microbes, the traces of the world digested and metabolized, all the things you have eaten, all the places you have lived, all the stories of ancestral narratives, traces of landscapes people once lived, the foods they once ate. passing all the way back up the beat of the heart and the center of the chest. Noticing again the water that flows through the body and the veins. Coming back up all the way to the breath. And we'll breathe again 3 times all together. Breathing in and out. In and out. In and out. Noticing again where you come into contact with the chair, the floor. Feeling that point of pressure. Feeling your body supported. And you can wiggle your fingers and toes if you would like. And gently open your eyes when you're ready. So much of my work is about finding ways back to relating to these states of entanglement. And one of the things that has been most clear to me has been that our bodies are transtopic sites. Our bodies are sites of constant transition, whether we identify with trans narratives or not. Our body is composed of vast, cosmic, ancient narratives. All of those minerals, all of the waters, all of the breath, all contained within one system, cycled again and again and again, making a billion different shapes, occupying a billion different landscapes, but all coming to rest very temporarily inside of us. And we contain many different scales across that as well. Whilst my blood holds the iron that, as I mentioned, can only be formed inside of dying stars, I also contain soil bacteria from the time that I've been in Sao Paulo. These bacteria slip in and out of our body all of the time, very transient, always changing the way that our bodies function, always shifting our understanding of ourselves, whether we realize or not. The water that we drink takes 3 weeks to replace inside of our bodies, all of the cells, so that what we speak with becomes the water wherever we are, wherever that water source is, where people tend to drink their water from. And we become composed and recomposed again and again and again. And we know also that we shed all of our cells and transform in 7-year cycles as well. We're constantly shedding hair. We're constantly slipping out of our skin. Constant change always going on and always bringing us into these other vast stories of change. One of the things that I've been so lucky to learn from the Indigenous communities and elders who I've worked with in so-called Australia has been about how we come back into these long stories and understand that we are part of really, really vast, deep time narratives. The Indigenous people of Australia are the oldest living culture in the world, and they have stories of ice ages and volcanic events which are more than 100,000 years old. And they remind us all the time that the short-term stories that we've got of capitalist and colonial frameworks that tell us long-term planning is 3 to 5 years, that the world is ending, are false. They're myths. And very convincing myths with excellent propaganda machines behind them, but still just stories. This is where we live at the moment. When Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," he performed a very violent surgery of severing the body from the mind. And all of a sudden, dominant Western thinking moved its way into thinking that the conceptual was more important than the somatic. And what followed from that and entangled with that are all of the dangerous, extractive, othering narratives of colonization and eventually capitalism that we now live inside of, where we imagine that there is a hierarchy which humans sit at the top of when in actual fact we are one of 8 million species, all of whom perform jobs, all of whom have agency, and all of whom are vital to navigating the planet that we live on and keeping its continuance. These are some of the binaries that we live underneath. Some of the binaries that have slipped into the very fabric of the way that we receive one another, the way that we build culture, the spaces that we have to walk into, and the stories that we tell ourselves but also reinforce for one another unwittingly. Nature, culture, female, male, matter over mind, savage over civilized, inside and outside, and human and animal. When in actual fact, no thing can be separate. As we've explored in our bodies as these complex sites of co-composition, how could you ever separate something? How can we have something as simple as inside as outside, when in fact everything slips between everything else? The earth is in its very foundation non-binary. It exceeds categories. It refuses stasis. It is not neat. It is messy, complex, multiform. Some of my favorite little reminders of that in a very straightforward sense are fungi, which have 23,000 gender expressions, and the banana slug, who shifts its gender expression across its lifetime. But we see these stories all through nature. Snakes change gender. Butterflies can be two genders simultaneously, depending on the species and the context in which they grow. And the planet is composed of these very complex, transient narratives, always in transition. Never a moment of stasis. Never a neat separation between one event and another. Never a neat ending and a neat beginning. We are always in motion. So when we come to this as trans people, when I come to understand the future through my lens as a trans and non-binary person, for whom identity is unfixed, for whom worlding occurs every single day, I wake up and rediscover myself, my community, my place in it, find new ways of self-expression. It appears to me that some of these binaries have found their way very deeply into our sense of futurity and what we consider to be possible. Utopia and dystopia are part of this binary narrative. The sense that we're moving towards resolution of one way or the other, one of which is very convenient for controlling us, but I would argue both of them are in certain ways. If we think we're headed towards utopia, we may feel that we don't have any work to do. But we also have the question of whose utopia is it? And if we're heading towards a dystopia, well, perhaps there's no point. And we've sold these stories. We've been sold these stories for a long time around the world, lots of different cultures, lots of different entertainment packages. The idea that the world is ending or that the world will be completely saved and the future must look like that. But when I look at these frameworks, knowing what I know about what it is to be inside of a non-binary body, it seems very unlikely to me. Even looking at a futures frame where we understand that today is a future that we are inside of right now. And today we're building a future in tomorrow. And of course, we don't live in one of these or the other. We live in both of these, and they are just unevenly distributed. In fact, they can exist simultaneously in a mess. Perhaps personally, you might be having a utopia, whilst all around us things seem to be getting worse and more dangerous and collapsing. Perhaps the inverse. Perhaps things are finally starting to lift and feeling hopeful and possible, but in your own life, things are falling apart. These binaries don't hold. It's always nice to put Octavia Butler up. I feel like Octavia Butler should be in every every conference talk. This is a necessary quote. This is from Parable of the Sower, for those of you who are not familiar with it. And the protagonist in that story is writing a scripture for the new world, a world that is moving towards repair and grappling with how they might make ideologies of regeneration in the ruins and collapse. And it frames so beautifully what we know from looking closely to the Earth and Earth systems as well, that there is only change here. There is no stasis. There is no stability. And following on the thread of fantastic speculative thinkers, this quote by Ursula Le Guin that what goes too long unchanged destroys itself. The forest is forever because it dies, and so it lives. I feel that one of the things that's really important at the moment as we live in these moments of what looks like incredible ruin and collapse is how we come to die well. As a non-binary person, as my identity shifts, I experience 1,000 deaths. All of us do. Our relationships to our community, our relationships to ourselves, perhaps to our partners, perhaps to our families, change again and again and again and again. And there is a lot to grieve. And on a collective level at the moment, something we are missing in this world are ways to collectively grieve, to allow ourselves the safety of collapse. The philosopher Anna Singh talks about this. She says we're looking for ways of living and dying well together. It's not enough for us to rebuild our relationships with one another and with the world. We also have to figure out how to grieve what's been lost and how to let things die. We have to embrace the rot and the mess. Why would we be heading towards a binary future when we don't live in a binary present? My understanding of a transtopia, as opposed to a utopia or a dystopia, is a future of perpetual change and emergence. A space that is not looking for resolution, but is about process, about becoming with, and also about failure and mess and death and collapse. How can we find ways to think of the future as iterative, finding ongoing change, getting ourselves comfortable with uncertainty? And I would argue that the trans community are the experts in this space. Every day we explore uncertainty. Every day we step our feet down onto uncertain sands of identity, shifting global politics and local experiences. We are always making our futures inside of change. Andrea Gibson, in her essay about coming out being a perpetual process, frames this really beautifully. And I love that she says, I live with an electric curiosity about who I will become in the future. And I think as the trans community, we have always been such excellent futurists. If anyone is going to lead us in the ways of how we might walk through ruin and make it beautiful, I think it's the trans community. This Gramsci quote has been getting more and more traction since the COVID years. The old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. The beautiful thing about monsters is that they exceed categories. They distress stories. They're hard to pin down. They're unruly. They're feral. They're uncanny. They mutate. They shift. And this is true in many ways. We would all agree that now is a time of monsters. I think in both a human and a non-human way when I think about chimeric and hybrid bodies that are emerging under anthropogenic frameworks, thinking about things like plastic glomerate, where plastic fuses itself to rocks, thinking about forever chemicals winding their way through all of the air and the soil and finding their ways into our bodies. But I also think that there's something ecstatic that can be found inside of the monstrous. The reason that we did the meditation at the beginning, as I mentioned, is because we need these embodied processes. Trans identities rest so much on our bodies. There is so much liberation and suffering tied to physical expression of ourselves and the way that it meets our gender expression. And particularly as a non-binary person, where I would say I occupy the space of the monstrous very happily. For me, the idea of transtopic futures, if we're moving away from these binaries, if we're moving away from utopias and dystopias, if we're trying to undo the separation of nature and culture or body and mind, then we need to bring ourselves wholly in an embodied way, welcome one another's bodies, and point directly to those stories, to hold space for one another. And as a community, this is where we have something to offer in terms of how do we face ruin and collapse? How do we face the monstrous? How do we face these terrible ends? We're not afraid of monsters. We're very good monsters some of the time. We're very good at occupying the edges and making them look really fucking good. We've always been capable of moving through and surviving terror. It's one of the places that we play together. It's one of the places that we see each other inside of. We're unafraid of walking in those dark edges. We've been doing it all along. We've been doing it through all of history. We are the legacy of many, many generations of trans people before us who walked through the dark and managed to find beautiful ways to coexist and rewrite stories from inside of those places. This is the work of an Australian trans artist called Amos Gerhardt, and it's called Small Acts of a Resistance. It's part of a very beautiful series. And I've included it, perhaps unsurprisingly given what's written on the slide, because it is such a beautiful demonstration of these small and powerful representations of possibility. What we need right now is radical imagination. What the world needs is visionary action. What the world needs are people who are willing to look at all that we've been offered, the narratives we've been given, the frameworks we've been offered to live with inside, and say no, thank you. And ask what else might be possible. And we know that this is already happening. We know this is happening in trans communities around the world. This is where we excel. Showing up every single day for us is an act of radical imagination. We are exceptional futurists. The trans theorist Jack Halverson talks about unworlding, which is this idea of collapse. How do we allow it to happen? And the way that they frame it is talking about unworlding, holding space for things to fall apart. And Dr. Jen Ray, who's an incredible Indigenous academic from Turtle Island, speaks about reworlding and how we put things back together. And I would argue that we do this every single day as trans people. So what happens if we look across everything that we've been given and everything that we live inside, and we don't expect anything to resolve? If we look at the way that the planet moves, and it moves through us, and we look at our own experiences with transition and change, and then cast our eyes out to a distant horizon, what shifts if we decide that we're making our home here? What shifts if we decide that maybe things will resolve in some form or other, but where we are right now is strange, uncanny, unruly, feral, wicked, monstrous? How can we celebrate the uncertainty as opposed to being shaken by it? How do we make our homes in that? And my proposition is that a transtopia is about this ongoing space, acting without expectation of resolution, without needing resolution, without ever expecting that things on the horizon will complete themselves, that we will have a fixed utopia, that we're definitely headed towards a utopia, but allows space for both of those things to exist together. And I've included this on coral polyps because they're also very weird rewilders. Symbiotic bodies, strange gender expressions. And how do we do this in the way that we as trans and non-binary people can do everything with exceptional power, with exceptional pleasure, with beauty? Finding spaces to commune with one another and make worlds in strange new ways. And how do we extend this to other people? Because one of the things I'm interested in thinking about transplanetary futures and Transtopia is not just that we possess these skills, but that we have an obligation to others. But we have an invitation to reach to them across the divides that we have and offer them new ways of being, something that perhaps they're not aware that we even have. World-building skills that are unique to the trans community. And one of the lines of this talk, Staying with the Change, is taken from Donna Haraway's book, Staying with the Trouble. And in Staying with the Trouble, she talks a lot about how we might do this, how we might hone our attention on the suffering, the collapse, the ruin, the discomfort that we feel deeply inside of our bodies, but also our collective bodies, and how we can stay with it, how we can build resilience to stay inside of it. And one of the things that she mentions inside of this is this quote here, that it matters what matters we use to think other matters. It matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with. It matters what stories make world and what worlds make stories. And this is thinking about what is centered, what is put at the foreground, what we're offering to one another, where we are unwittingly excluding our own narratives or perhaps the narratives of more than human worlds and ecologies, and reinscribing old patterns, old thinking, and old dualisms, whilst also hoping that we're going to wind up somewhere else in the future. And there's an invitation in this quote to think really radically about what stories we're building worlds from, to think very closely and carefully with it in the way that we speak with one another, and also what we bring to the world, what we show up with, which stories we're putting forward as a community to help build a collective future. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that because one of the things that's really informed my thinking in transplanetary work, the ideas of Transtopia and how we might bring people to different sorts of futures, comes from my work in world building. I work across a lot of different disciplines, but all of my work includes world building. It includes narratives of a future that haven't yet come, and very commonly an invitation for people to come in and rehearse those futures. Muto, which is on at the moment as a part of this program over in Gallery Metropoli, is a transtopic future. It is a future where temples of regeneration have popped up inside of cities all over the world, and that those are spaces occupied by trans visionaries, people who are celebrated for their ability to let the world fall away and to let new worlds be created. And in Muto, the regenerators in the temple had taken their lessons from the monarch butterfly. Now, when a butterfly goes into a chrysalis stage, when the caterpillar cocoons itself, it completely dissolves. The only thing that remains are these small cells called imaginal cells. And there's one cell per organ that helps the body of the caterpillar dissolve and then rebuild as a butterfly. There's one cell for the antenna, one for the wings, one for the intestinal system. And so in this temple, trans people come, they rest, they dissolve, and they rebuild the body of the future together. These are some of the scenes from inside of the temple. Some of the temple guardians who lead people through the process. The altar where people place their prayers. in some of the prayers that have been left so far. What's important about this and all of the worlding work that I make is that it ties very closely to how we bring other people to futures with us. And what I know for sure is that there are a couple of things that are guaranteed to transport people, that are guaranteed to help people through transition from where they are to where they might go. One of those is how we take people across thresholds. It's how we invite one another in. In world building work, you have to take people from the present and bring them into the future very quickly. And the invitations have to be careful. They have to be considered. They have to be intentional. We have to do it in a group. People can't do it alone. We have to do it at least in small groups together. People aren't able to take themselves from where they are and shift into radically new states of thinking alone. It's essential to reach a hand out, to offer a process, to offer companionship in that. Our bodies have to be included. Conceptual frameworks are not enough. People have to feel the difference. People have to have their whole bodies in an imaginary. And I've been thinking a lot recently about how we do this outside of art spaces. How we can offer each other different sorts of invitations into different kinds of conversations. How we can offer threshold rituals to invite one another in. How we can look to one another and say, I know you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable too, this is uncomfortable. We need to stay inside. We need to know that this is part of the change. We need to know that no thing is static. The whole planet is always in motion. And we need to trust that we're moving with it and invite others to move with us as well. So I hope when you leave here today, the question of what a transtopia might be, how it might already be with us in this space as we live inside of complex and dynamic flux, and what it might become ripples out with you through your lives. And maybe we'll be able to build a transtopia in our present. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, AUDAX, for this travel and travel inside us. Travel to think about us. Travel to think about me, to think about you. And I think too, this travel is very, very important for all the trans people that we think we have a future. I don't know, but we have, and we help us to think about this. Vou abrir agora para perguntas e respostas, Q&A for AUDAX. Se alguém quiser perguntar, pode levantar a mão que eu levo o microfone até aí. Alguém? Bem, oh, yeah.
You're here today not only because of your amazing research, but also with Mucho, which is an installation that is also about the waiting and the time of becoming. And you're talking a lot about the monsters and how we can create ourselves. And I would like you to try to sum up in a few words what is the power of dreaming about how we can become, because we as trans people, we can dream what we can be in our bodies, not only in our minds, in our behaviors as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, we know that we can't create anything that we can't first see, and I would argue that the first way that we see anything is in our mind's eye. And dreaming for me certainly has been so essential to the way that I've come to understand myself and the way that I have excavated my identity as a trans and non-binary person, drawing it further and further to the surface. so much for me about my gender identity began as a very deep listening to myself, these whispers of things around the edges of my awareness of self. And then the very next stage of that is, of course, dreaming what could be possible. And of course, when we dream, we're unbound from all of the material conditions that we live inside of. We can become anything. And I think particularly at the moment, as we live in rates of such escalated and accelerated change, the best thing we can do is dream impossible visions, strange visions, because at the moment, even our material conditions are changing so rapidly that just about anything is possible. And when it comes to our bodies, there is no limit to how we might shift the way that we show up physically in the world. I don't have the benefit of knowing what everyone's dreams and the spaces are all of the time because I'm not in the temple all of the time. But I know from the things that we've heard from people, it's a powerful opportunity to be able to let expectations fall away and to let new things drift in. And when we enter into that space, we're unsure of what we're connecting with. We don't know what happens when we sleep. We don't know what dreams are. We have very little information about what happens when we sleep. And of course, as research continues, we're discovering more and more strange things, people who can pass information in their dreams. Perhaps some of you, like me, are people who dream things that come true. There's no explanation for what that might be. It could be that there are a billion different realities, and when I sleep at night, I dream every single possibility, and one of those comes into being. It could be that there are multiple timelines folding on top of each other, and when I dream, I'm connecting with them. Or perhaps it's that the dreaming is part of the process of the dropping in and connecting with those things, and it allows us to move intuitively through the world. I have lots of friends who think very differently of dreaming, but I think we can all agree that it is always a powerful space, perhaps in different degrees, but we've all had experiences of dreams that feel transformative, that feel visceral, that feel material. Everyone's had the experience of crying after a dream. Perhaps some of you have the experience of being woken up laughing from a dream. And I think that means that we're always living alongside something that we're not necessarily able to name, which is so valuable for us inside of the frameworks that we live in. To be able to have something that we can point at directly and say, it doesn't really matter what you believe in, you dream. We don't know what that is. And if we don't know what that is, everything's up for debate. That's what I think about dreaming. Thank you. It's a beautiful question.
That's so beautiful, AUDAX. One last thing about your job. When you compare, when you put nature, the fauna, flora, ecology, and on your job makes me, a Pisces girl, fall in love with your job. Thank you so much.